My question of Tony to try to establish this, Tony, is when you're going to do this study and it says 40, will you post it at 40? And the only reason I ask that is because of Mr. Durrell's comments in the advocate that said that he would not allow it to be done, and that gave me some concerns that if the study shows that it's 40 and Mr. Durrell does not allow it to move forward and be 40, then that's my concerns. And
CG agrees that from Kali Saloon Road to the Vermilion River, at the time of the opening of Camellia Boulevard to traffic, the posted speed limit on Camellia Boulevard will be 35 miles per hour. Upon completion of said construction, said roadway will be posted so as to restrict heavy truck traffic to that servicing the village of River Ranch. Before any changes are made to the speed limit and heavy truck use on Camellia Boulevard, LCG will schedule a public meeting regarding the same to hear the various positions relative to the said changes. This meeting will be conducted by LCG's Traffic and Transportation Department after reasonable notice to River Ranch Development Association. I was familiar with this. I read it before I did the ordinance. I asked Mr. Trammell if he thought he needed to schedule an additional hearing, and his opinion was that the introductory ordinance at the time of introduction and the final adoption hearing constituted two public hearings that more than satisfied the requirement of a public hearing. So there's no technicality. It's 35, and if we ever want to change it, we have to have a hearing. That's the agreement. And it is from the river to Kali Saloon, not on the other side of the river, not on the other side of Kali Saloon. How are we breaking the agreement?
I think that in government ease, we understand one thing, but the public understands that once it's done, it's done. And they think that once they make an agreement with LCG that the speed limit will be 35, then it should remain so. And I think that the majority of the public would see any change of that to be a breaking of the agreement, even though you're following that ordinance. And I agree that you're following that ordinance. I'm just telling you what I believe the public perception would be.
And one of the opponents here tonight is going to be the developer of River Ranch, who actually had a part in drafting that agreement. Either he or his attorneys did, without a doubt, and they signed the agreement.
What was your organization or your section recommendation from Johnson to the river?
It is what is posted based on the premise that was there, based on the premise of how the ordinance was written.
Did you read that agreement?
Yes,
before
I
you
did.
made a premise?
I'm very familiar with that agreement.
Does the agreement says that it's your call from Johnson to the river, or misunderstanding what the agreement says?
The agreement says the requirement is only from the river to Kali Saloon Road.
Well, I'm asking about from Johnson to the river. What is your recommendation?
I'm telling you that it's currently posted at 35 miles an hour.
And that is your recommendation?
I didn't say that.
I'm not asking what, I know what the agreement says. What do you recommend?
I'm not going to recommend anything until the studies have been done.
Okay, so the studies are going to affect Johnson to the river?
Yes.
Okay.
In order for consolidated government to get the permission of the Coast Guard to build the project, to build the bridge, you had to do an environmental impact study. That was done in 1999. In 1999, a study was commissioned to make sure that the sound level would not exceed the maximums allowed by law. And it was done at 35. And I presume that was done with the full support of everybody in the technical side, to include Mr. Trammell. I question seriously whether you could pass an environmental impact study if you posted that speed limit at 45 or 40, especially in light of the volume of traffic on that street. So that study's already been done. In 1999, the backup document in the ordinance that was before you, that 3 of y'all voted for, Mr. Trammell raised no objection to setting this speed limit. If the Red Flex van has not been sent out there, I don't understand why not. There's plenty of room to park it, regardless of whatever you may think about the Red Flex van. We have a speed problem on Camellia as it exists now. The effective speed limit on Camellia, if you did a speed average, is probably between 40 and 50 miles an hour. It's dangerous. It's also loud.
We were in contact with national traffic engineers at the time, and it was proposed at that time as a suggestion that we offer a speed limit of 35 miles an hour to minimize the decibel rating in the adjacent neighborhoods. It wasn't simply about River Ranch. Actually, at the time, it had nothing to do with River Ranch. There was no one living there. It was bean fields. It was about appeasing the neighborhoods that dealt with this project, or coming of this project, Camellia Boulevard. And it was our proposition that perhaps 35 miles an hour is something to put on the table, and it was accepted. Now, there were changes made. One of the changes was the design of the corridor. Camellia is not a 35-mile-an-hour corridor. It is a 45, and I would argue perhaps even a 55-mile-an-hour corridor by its design today. And that the lane widths are far in excess of speed limits that would be 35 miles an hour. And it was a commitment of the parish, of the city at the time, to mandate. Just a little bit more time, please.
Objection.
May I? And it was a commitment to adhere to the 35 miles an hour, and it was not until later in 1999, as I'm hearing tonight, that it was changed, the lane widths were changed. And I remember being very, very disappointed, and I remember saying, we will never be able to make people psychologically drive down that corridor at 35 miles an hour. And that's the problem you're having today. I live in River Ranch now, and I hate the 35 miles an hour. But I will tell you, I did a little exercise just this weekend. I drove from Colley's Saloon Road to Johnston at 35, and it took me X number of minutes. And I drove it back, I hope the van's not around, at 45. I saved 12 seconds.